This is the Samsung Galaxy Tablet 10.1 inch lens replacement, and we just have two screws to remove at the bottom of the tablet. They are covered by tabs here that you can pry off, and I'm using a razor, but you don't need something that sharp. You can just kind of get into the corner with just about anything. But what you will need to have is a tri-wing screwdriver. These aren't used very often. Mostly they are used on cheap phones, honestly, like Kyocera. But they actually work on this particular tablet. I'm not sure why they chose this, so not a very common driver, but you will have to have that to remove these two screws. From that point, the rest of this is relatively straightforward. All we're going to do is pry the rear housing off of the tablet. It will take some time in order to remove it, so what you're going to do is take a pry tool and just start under the edge here, and you want to get the entire assembly out. Don't try to pry the lens off just yet. All we're doing is taking the back cover off, and you'll see here as I work around how it starts to separate. This whole thing just kind of snaps into place, and that's what holds it on. There aren't too many things that you have to worry about damaging as long as you just go right around the edges here. The only thing that could possibly be a problem is the headset jack, so be real careful when you're prying around that area. Other than that, just get in here and you'll see that it starts to come out without too much effort, and you can just work your way around there again with the pry tool. Use a soft pry tool. You don't want to cut into this or leave any dents behind, so I recommend not using a metal tool to open this device. And there you can see we've got the entire assembly removed from the rear housing, so we'll set that aside from now. The center flex cable here, just carefully lift up that gate from for the digitizer, and then you can slide the cable right out. We will need to have that disconnected. And this is where it gets fun. This will require some time and effort, and you want to be very careful. Don't cut yourself. On this particular one, there's quite a bit of broken glass, so you just have to be careful. And the adhesive that holds this thing in place is very, very, very strong. So you're definitely going to have to apply some heat, and you will have to work at this for a while. And in this case, I would actually recommend using your metal pry tool. That's the best way to have enough strength to get underneath this. The only problem is if you put too much pressure in one spot, you will definitely break the glass more. So what you want to kind of do after you heat this up really well is start out with the metal pry tool, and then I usually switch over to something like a plastic tool, and eventually you'll see here I'm using SIM card, full-size SIM card, whatever you want to call them, but basically a credit card would work also. So you see I try to get into this with the plastic tool, and it's just really stuck so well on there you can't get it inside, so you'll need something very thin to pry between these two layers here. And when I first started, I actually went between the glass and the adhesive. We want to really get underneath that adhesive if possible. If not, it's okay. You can come back later and pull it off. But if you can, try to get under that black stripe, and you'll see when we get this taken apart that if you can get between the metal housing and the black stripe, which is the adhesive, then you can kind of get the whole thing off at once if you're lucky. So you can see I've switched over to basically the equivalent of a credit card. And I'm going to continue heating this and just kind of work it around the edges. Gives me a little bit more leverage, but again, I've got a soft material that I'm working with. And another thing you want to watch out for is you don't want to go in too deep. You do not want to get any adhesive on the LCD itself. If you do, you're going to have to spend some time cleaning that up. And of course, if you put any pressure on the LCD, either with your pry tool or with the glass as the result of leverage, it is possible to break the LCD, so be very careful. You don't have to replace that also. As you can see, you really have to put some effort into getting into this thing. So after about 5 or 10 minutes here, and don't worry about that little gold piece down at the bottom, that's actually part of the lens itself, which will be replaced. I did work at this for probably a good 10-15 minutes or so, and finally got all the way around the edges, and just removing the last piece at the bottom now. So I used a little bit of heat, take my credit card, and kind of just pry down here along the edge. Again, being very careful not to make contact with the LCD. And there you can see the little adhesive strip that I initially was prying on top of, so I'm going to try to get behind that and take this all off at once if possible. Okay, and I just kind of started heating that up and went ahead and pulled it the rest of the way. Most of it came apart. I did have to kind of strip this adhesive off, and you can see that's some really thick, heavy-duty stuff. Fortunately, the new lens comes with that adhesive, so the main thing here is to get this surface perfectly spotless clean, because once you put the new lens on, you do not want to have to take it off again. It's not going to be easy. So as you can see, I've kind of put the lens over the top, make sure there's no dust or debris, no fingerprints. Once we pull off the tape that covers the adhesive and put this thing on there, it is going to stay. And so not only do you want to have it perfectly clean on the inside, and I'm cleaning the outside also so I can kind of see through, and it's hard to tell whether the dust is on the inside or outside. So you want to have two very clean surfaces you're working with here, and make sure to line this thing up exactly in the position that you want it to be mounted. So you see a little bit of smudge there over in the corner. Kind of dust this off one last time. And I'm not in a dust-free environment, so this can be tricky. But once we get it nice and clean, we'll go ahead and peel the plastic off that covers the adhesive, and then we're going to set this on top. You'll see that I kind of grip it at opposing corners here to line it up. We want to have perfectly lined up there, and this for me was the easiest way to do it. Before you actually stick it in place, just make sure that everything is square. And there you have it. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and flip it over. And we can actually just plug our lens back into the back of the logic board. And that is the great majority of this repair. All we have to do now is carefully maneuver this back into the rear housing, and make sure you're careful around that headset jack. I recommend you wedge that piece in first. And before we do that, of course, I am going to power it up and make sure everything is working properly. Don't want to have to pull it out again. And you can see we've got a good LCD, didn't damage anything. And we'll time lapse this here for a second so I can show you that the touchscreen is actually functioning properly. And of course we will have to unlock the screen before we can operate it. And there you have your new touchscreen digitizer. Everything seems to be working so far. And we'll go ahead and shut that off again. Put it back into the rear housing. 2 screws go back on the bottom, and that's about it. Thanks for watching.